Welcome to the No Stages podcast, episode 6. Great guest this evening. Dan Rembold is joining us. Dan, thanks very much for taking the time to chat.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, Dan, you have got quite the interesting story. Can you tell us a little bit, one, just how you got into cycling, first of all?
I was a weekend warrior hobby cyclist until a few years ago. So I got a bike when I moved to Texas in 2009 and just got immediately addicted to spending hours on the road out with friends and enjoying the countryside on the weekends. And that was about it. I did some 50, 60, 100-mile rides, and that was as far as I took it before 2017.
And then you actually had quite the speed bump on the way. Can you share your story with us? Because it is quite the story.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So life was grand in 2017. I was thriving, amazing wife and 5 kids. My career was going well. I was enjoying time on the bike. And relatively fit and healthy. And then out of nowhere, I get this fever, and I'm not usually sick. So after a bunch of doctors' checkups, finally I went in to check myself into the hospital and try to figure out what was going on. And it turned out to be a really aggressive and deadly form of cancer called leukemia. And the day I checked into the hospital, Friday the 13th, I asked the doctor later, like, how long would I have lived if we hadn't caught this? I had a fever and that was about it. Didn't feel great, but nothing major. And I figured he'd say a few months, a year or two. And the answer came back, well, you had about 72 hours left to live. And right when we caught this, the leukemia was starting to shut all your organs down. And after that point, there's not much we can do to save you. So that was a wild wake up call in 2017.
And that, I mean, actually, if you had been somebody who normally got colds, or it sounds like you wouldn't have even gone to the doctor.
I wouldn't have. And one of the things that led me to go in is my wife is a runner, and she was training for her first ever marathon in her life. And it was that coming weekend down in Houston. And so we're like, well, what should we do? Can she still go down and we get help with the kids or what? And so I went into the hospital to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And fortunately was just in time.
And now, did she go do her marathon?
She did.
Yes.
We found, I got the diagnosis on Saturday, and they said they actually take a bone marrow test from your hip to determine for sure that this is what the disease is.
Is that as painful as it sounds?
It's not the most pleasant thing. Yeah. They'll dope you up, but there's so much they can do when they're taking a chip of bone out of your hip. But it was going to be until Monday before they could really start the treatments to try to get the cancer under control. And I told my wife, I'm like, I'm under great care here in the hospital. I'd much rather sit here in bed and follow you on my phone and see how you're doing in this marathon than have you just sitting around, sitting in the hospital room. And at that point, the version of leukemia that I got, it's less than a 25% survival rate. And so we really didn't know what was going to come next, and if if she would get a chance to ever run another marathon again. So she went with some friends down to Houston, and she did amazingly well. And then she took the rest of the year off to take care of me.
So what was your rehab like? I mean, did you undergo chemotherapy? Every cancer treatment I've heard of seems like it just takes so much out of you physically and mentally.
Yeah, it really does. And they learn more about your specific version of the disease the more time the doctors get with you and the more tests they can run. And so for AML leukemia is what I got, acute myeloid leukemia. It's a disease where your white blood cells start to rapidly replicate in a cancerous form and your body doesn't know how to shut it off. And it's kind of famous for St. Jude's, the bald kids. That's primarily AML leukemia. And normally they would treat it with chemotherapy. The version I got is an even more rare version called FLT3 that comes along with a molecular mutation, and they don't know how to cure it with chemo alone. They can get it under control, but then it's going to continue to come back. And fortunately, in the recent years, they've developed a treatment called a bone marrow transplant, and they literally inject you with a chemo that's derived from mustard gas. It was discovered after World War I, and it destroys your bone marrow and your immune system. And if you're fortunate enough to find a DNA matched donor that's a really close fit to your DNA, you can get bone marrow from that person and regrow and reboot your entire immune system. And so, fortunately for me, that's what we were able to do. And we found a anonymous donor at the time out of Germany, and her DNA was a really close fit to mine. It's about a 1 in 10 million chance to match a random person of your same ethnic background. And so the doctors were able to find this woman in Germany. She donated stem cells, and they used that to reboot my immune system about 6 months after I was first diagnosed with this cancer.
Now, how are you mentally at that point? Or, I mean, what's really your driving thought? I want to get better. I mean, you said there's only a 25% chance of survival. So are you preparing for the end? I mean, what, just to be very open about it, what was your mental state?
Yeah, we were preparing for any outcome, and my wife and I had always felt very blessed in our circumstances in life. We have 5 amazing kids, incredible family support, and so of course it's a devastating diagnosis. But we flipped pretty fast to focus on what we did have going for us and trying not to be weighed down by the baggage of what might happen. And when I was in the hospital in Dallas being treated for this, there were a newborn baby in the room next to me that was born with this disease. There was a 80-year-old on the other side of the hall who couldn't live through the transplant process. So they were basically just making him comfortable. And here I was, fit, cycling on the weekends, in my late 30s at the time, and incredible family and friend support. And so my mindset just flipped to bring it on. Like, if I'm going to get sick, I might as well get a tough one, and let's show this cancer what we can do. And so, of course, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And actually, my last chemo treatment right before the transplant, the nurse came and checked on me late at night. She left the room. I rolled over to try to go to sleep. And then my heart started racing and then calm and then racing and calm. And my heart had gone into AFib from the chemo dose. And you don't know at that point. I don't know if I'm going to be alive the next morning or not. But we kind of made peace with that we were just going to attack this the best we possibly could. And whatever the outcome was going to be is what it was going to be. But that, I think, mindset really helped us in kind of working through the stages of treatment and recovery.
When did you start to feel normal again?
Well, the RAAM relay in 2021 was kind of my declaration that I'm back to normal health again.
It was, okay.
I did this transplant in 2017. I was on an oral chemo pill for about a year after that, which really suppresses your energy level. In late 2018 and 2019, I got revaccinated for everything because the transplant wiped out my entire immune system. All the vaccinations I had as a kid, all gone. You're like a newborn baby with a brand new immune system. And so 2019 was just slowly getting back on the bike, starting to get my energy level back, trying to wean off of all the post-transplant medications. And then in 2020, I got the call from a friend of a friend, asking about doing this RAAM relay. And that really motivated me to hire a coach and start training. And I kind of made it this challenge of could I get even more physically fit after going through this than I was before? And it was probably in that late 2020 was the first ultra distance race I ever did. I did a 225-mile NCOM, the No Country for Old Men challenge out in West Texas, and then followed by the RAAM relay the next summer, and that really kind of built my confidence that things aren't perfect. I still have some small side effects from the treatment, but it was a big confidence booster that I was back on my feet and doing physical challenges that were beyond what I did even before cancer.
I'm trying to hold back rolling my eyes right now because you come out of chemo treatment right into COVID with a brand new immune system.
Yeah, and that was a little ironic because for my treatments, I had to go through this training of I was the only person in Costco with a mask on before COVID, and the kids all had to learn to wash their hands and put a mask on before they could come see dad. And so we actually had like crates of masks and hand sanitizer before COVID ever hit. So it's like, well, this is one positive outcome of going through this a few years ago. But yeah, it was definitely a transition, and we did have to be careful when COVID hit because I have the immune system of a 6-year-old, and so I do the cycling really helps me as a fun way to keep my fitness up and make sure that I'm being as active and healthy as I can be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I'm right there with George. Like I'm picking my jaw up off the floor. I mean, we hear a lot of amazing stories and a lot of people who are touched by things that they raise money for. But your story is mind blowing. And when I told George about it, I was like, it's a great story. We have to hear it. So when you come out of COVID and cancer and all these things and race RAAM as a relay, how did you feel? Like, did you feel pretty good on the bike, or was it a battle? I mean, RAAM's tough anyway, no matter how you do it, but you mix in all these other things, it can't be easy.
Yeah, the recovery phase 2019 and 20 was definitely a battle, and the trying to keep motivated to push yourself when you just feel like junk and you have some days that are okay and some days that aren't, that's tough. But having a goal makes a huge difference. And I was actually out riding by my house in 2019, and I passed a group of team and training riders, which are raising money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And so I like cheered them on. I was like, I'm alive because of what you guys do, and thank you so much for doing all this good work. And so I traded contact info with them, and it was the following year when they reached out to me and said, hey, there's this cancer survivor in Florida that wants to put this team together of survivors to do a bike race, and we know you're a cyclist and you're a survivor. And so they get me in touch with this guy, and I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like fun. What kind of race are we talking about here? And he says, the Race Across America. And I was like, well, wait a minute, time out. Like, this isn't just, I've done the Hotter Than Hell 100 in Texas before, but that's a whole different ordeal. So before I told him, no way, you're crazy, I was like, okay, well, I am a survivor against odds, and I love being on the bike, and I can help raise awareness and raise some money for LLS and the National Pediatric Cancer Foundation. But I'm not a cyclist, like really, like, the weekend warrior. So when I signed up, I ended up hiring a coach. And really that was a big motivational factor too, because my coach, George, he assigns me my workout schedule every week. He's checking in with me all the time. And that also was very helpful in kind of pushing through those barriers of not feeling the best and trying to get my fitness level up through that training process.
So tell us about your jersey. You're doing Race Across the West this year. Are you going solo?
I am. This is the longest I've ever attempted solo. And maybe to back up slightly, after I got in shape for the RAAM relay, I thought, well, I should keep going. So I signed up for the Texas Time Trials 24-hour. in the fall of 2021, and I got hit by a car 2 weeks before the race. This very sweet older lady didn't look and pulled out right into me and ran me right over with her SUV. And so somehow my guardian angel, like, thank you, was really watching out for me. I split my chin and had some bad bruising, but I didn't break any bones. And my bike was actually okay. And so after I got up and realized I was still alive, like, I jumped on the bike and rode to my sister-in-law dermatologist's house, and she glued my chin back together. And then I went and got an x-ray to make sure none of the bones were broken. And I was like, all right, I can still go for this 24-hour time trial. So I go down to Glen Rose to do this race. My oldest daughter is 16 at the time, 15 at the time. She's crewing for me. And I have no idea what I'm doing, right? I'm just going out for this long ride. And I ended up winning the whole race. And it was not the most competitive field that year. I think, like, the two that were vying to win right before COVID did way better than I did that year. But hey, I'll take it. And it kind of inspired me that, okay, in this ultra distance space, it's not only about fitness, it's about the mindset, it's about the logistics planning. And that kind of inspired me to keep riding. So I kept training in 2021 and 2022. Last year, I did the Longhorn 500, which was a blast, and it completely destroyed me. And it was the first race I ever did where I had to actually stop and sleep, and so I learned about all that. And then last fall, I was like, well, what should I take on another bigger challenge in 2023? And right before the early cutoff deadline, I signed up for RAAM Solo. And so the furthest I've ever traveled on a bike yet is the Longhorn 500, and I'm going to attempt to break my personal record here next month. So to your original question, my jersey and Be the Match.
Be the Match.
Be the Match is the organization that coordinates all bone marrow and stem cell transplants in the US. And so that's the organization that found my donor in Germany, who was the 1 in 10 million DNA match for me, and coordinated getting her to go donate stem cells, basically like a blood donation, and then transporting that to Dallas to save my life. And so when I started looking around, like, are there any other bone marrow transplant survivors or leukemia survivors that have done these kind of races? There's a few leukemia survivors out there. Everybody laughs at me when I ask if there's another transplant survivor, because they're like, what, are you nuts? Like, what? Like, no, you people don't go do what you're trying to do after a transplant. But I was like, all right, well, bring on the challenge. So this year, I'm partnering with the Be the Match organization. We're thrilled to do this because I'm the first ever bone marrow transplant survivor to attempt the race and attempt to finish it. And last year, they coordinated 7,054 transplants in the US. And the Be the Match organization does research. They do the cheek swabs to get people in the database to do these transplants. And then they also do funding for cancer patients going through the treatments to try to help with all the expenses in going through a treatment like that. So they may come cheer me on along the race course somewhere. They're based out of Minneapolis, but I'm just thrilled to be able to do this in partnership with that organization.
And where can people go to get more information about maybe making a donation of either money or of a sample?
Yeah, if you go to bethematch.org, that's their main website. And I have a page up, is bethematch.org/DanRaw2023. And that's got a little more detail about my story specifically. And we're doing fundraising as well as the awareness. And it really is super easy for the donors. It's like they'll mail you a kit to your house. You do a Q-tip cheek swab and send it back to them, just like the DNA registries, and then they have enough information from that if you're a potential and talk about.
You're good.
All right, so yeah, I was just saying to be able to either learn a little more about my story or donate to be a potential donor, you can go to bethematch.org/DanRaw2023. And if you sign up to be a donor, they just mail you a kit to your house. You do a Q-tip cheek swab and send it back, and that's all there is to it. And I'm alive because this lady in Germany went through that process and agreed to donate blood through that and save my life. And there are a lot of other people out there that don't have donors in the database today. It's a little less than half that are fortunate enough to find a match.
Well, Dan, I sure appreciate you joining us on No Stages, and I wish you all the best at Race Across the West this year. That's I think there's going to be a lot of people pulling for you.
There's no question. I mean, anything that any of these races can throw at you, it's nothing compared to what you've been through. And thanks a ton for your time. And we look forward to seeing you out in Oceanside and chatting some more.
You're welcome. I can't wait to get there. I'll look forward to seeing you here in a couple of weeks.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Have a good night.
Thank you, Dan.
You too.